view, social, cultural point of view. And of course, with the backlash against women's rights is all the time more difficult to work on it. So just over the time, the question of environment and climate change raised all over the world. And for us was little by little become part of our work, because if you want peace, you have to prepare and build peace, not only among human beings, but also with the nature, with the, we can say, with Mother Earth in the widest sense. So for this reason, we are today here, because we had a great opportunity to, we can say, integrate the question of climate change and the environment, we can say the nature rights and the Mother Earth rights, together with the women's rights, thanks also to the WEGO project. Today, there are many friends from the WEGO network that are here. The WEGO project is a project that started in 2018. The full name is Wellbeing, Ecology, Gender and Community. And this project is a research and training program on feminist political ecology in Europe. And thanks also to the capacity of the academicians that are also here today with us, we spread this network over Europe and really worldwide, we can say. And is very interesting because this project studies the different resilient economic and ecological practices of women in creating new form of livelihood and care activities in the context of climate change. So thanks to this project became a network that is going also, we can say, will go for sure beyond of the project network, of the project period. So today we are here also to speak out about women in grassroots environmental justice movement. And I want just to underline that it is really important to underline the role of women, because in general, we say women are the most marginalized people all over the world, but in fact, the women are the most stronger defender of not only of human rights, but also of the nature. And for this reason, we have always to keep in mind that we are strong, even if they just tell us differently stories. And so for this reason, we are here to speak about this together with many women that are very much committed on this subject. And so for this reason, let me just introduce our coordinator panelist, Wendy Harcourt, that is not only a friend, but she's also a professor at the ISS University in Netherlands. And she, before to be an academician, she has been working for 23 years in the International Development Society as editor and director of programs that was bridging movement together with a civil society activist, academician world, and policy and political people. So she was really, she is still a great women's supporter. So she published very interesting, she has published many books, but I would like to point out just the last one that has been just one moment, because I have to, I don't know if you want to just say, Wendy, because this publication
Okay.
Has been reached a lot of downloads, 43,000 downloads in 1 week. So, I mean, it's really interesting. And so I would like really that you introduce yourself regarding this new book that you wrote together with the other WEGO members.
Thanks a lot, Simona. I'll put in the chat the link to the book, which is on feminist methodologies. And yes. Indeed, it got 43,000 downloads, which is very exciting. Here we are meeting online. So it's sort of another kind of virtual connections that we have. And this book is therefore for free, and it was done by some wonderful students, and I had the pleasure of working with them to put the book together. So later I'll put in the chat the link, and you can download it for free. One of these benefits of working with funding from the EU, which is what this WEGO project does. So thank you very much, Simona, and thanks everybody for being here. I did want to mention that we're here not only for this interesting conversation amongst ourselves, which I'm looking forward to, particularly because we're trying to think through those links that Simona mentioned between gender, environment, and peace at this particular moment in time. I think we're very aware of the importance of peace. We're very aware of what's happening also with climate crisis, and we're very aware of the kind of threats to women's rights as well. So these are incredibly important topics. They're topics, though, that have been also taken up at the UN level, at the transnational level. And I think that's also an important thing for us to remember, that we not only are speaking amongst ourselves, whether we're professors or activists or people just interested in these issues, we've also got the chance to do this at the Commission for the Status of Women, a place where I have always found very interesting ideas mixing, or rather being brought to policy. So I also wanted just to underline that there are some very powerful statements that are being made by the CSW about echoing what Simona said, the resilience of women to climate change and environmental pressures. That's the resilience, but at the same time, we have the knowledge that we need to transform these unsustainable patterns of production and consumption across economies to one of sustainability. And this is a CSW saying that sustainability is being defined by gender equality and care for people and the planet at the center. And this is not just about words, this is about really needing huge shifts from fossil fuel dependent to climate resilient and low carbon economies. So the language is there in the CSW statements. They talk about also support and finance for gender responsive just transitions to regenerative green and blue economies with social protection and care at the center. I mean, very feminist and very important statements being there. But how is this going to happen? And with whom is this going to happen? It's true, Simona, we have this category of woman all over the world, of course, but there are very many different sorts of women. And there are many women who are not here today, who are really at the front lines of bearing the brunt of right now of war, or not only in the Ukraine, but in other places, conflicts in other places, but also of climate crisis. And it's their stories, their resilience, their knowledge that we're trying to give space to here. In a way, we're, if you like, tranquillicists, and that we are working, the panelists, you'll hear their stories, are working with these women and supporting and being part of the struggles for protecting their land and livelihoods and health of their children and communities and peace in those communities. So I wanted us just to remember that there are great words at the transnational level, but they're coming from these very real experiences. And this is what we're looking at today amongst the panel. And I'm very pleased to welcome Ana Agostino, who will be speaking from Uruguay. She's had also a lot of transnational experience. I've met her in different forums, and she'll bring some of those stories to us. Kayat Fakia from South Africa. She's also worked with many different community women's groups in South Africa. Miriam Conaju from Italy, working in one of the most difficult areas in Italy. She'll be bringing stories from the land of fires. Seema Kulkarni from India, working with women farmers in Pune and across India. Agostina Solero in Argentina, working with indigenous women from Patagonia. And Siti Manumah Mai, as I know her, from Indonesia, who's been working with grassroots women on all sorts of very extractive industries, and they're going to talk to us about the resistances there. What we've decided, as we have so many great speakers and we want to hear from all of them, is that we'll be doing a round of 3 questions, and the speakers have been given the questions before, so they've had a chance to think about them. And I'll be suggesting that those of you who have joined us, and very welcome, please do listen and put your comments and questions in the chat, and there'll be time to ask those, or at least the speakers can have a look at what you've had to contribute at the end of the panel. So I'm going to start with the first question. And I'm going to the order that I gave, if that's all right, if we could start with Anna, and then I'll ask Kayat to respond, then Miriam, Seema, Augustina, and Mai. And then the next question we'll do another order. Okay, so can you remember that order? I'll remind you if you can't. So the first question is really about which grassroots women's groups are we learning from as we're listening to you today, and so I'd like each of you just briefly in a couple of minutes to explain a little bit about the practices of these women at the grassroots in their struggle for protecting their land and livelihoods. Could you just briefly introduce those women's groups and your relationship to them? And if you could also feel free, this term grassroots might be something that in English makes sense, but maybe from the place where you are and the language that you speak, and again, thank you everybody for speaking in English, maybe that might have another meaning, or you might want to redefine it if you want to do that. So Anna, could I ask you to start?
Yes, well, good morning from the south of the world in Montevideo, and I'm really happy for the invitation.
What are you doing?
Okay.
I'm joining the webinar because of my friend, and then she's. But I don't really need.
Thank you very much, Anna. Sorry.
Okay. So. A parallel event of the CSW, as Wendy said, I mean, the CSW has meant for us women throughout many years a very important event, so it's really good to be here. And as he said, well, I'm a member of WEGO from the very moment when we thought about it in 2016. And now one of the roles that I played is as ombudsperson. Maybe you know that universities also have ombudspersons. But that has to do with the fact that I was the ombudsperson or public protector for the city of Montevideo for 5 years. And I mention this because the Defensoría, as we say in Spanish, is a place where ordinary people with everybody can come and present complaints about what is happening, what are the problems in the city. And from that point of view, the grassroots that I have chosen to share stories with you today, and I'm going to say it in Spanish, are the vecinas de Montevideo. The word vecinas in Spanish, I can translate it as female neighbors, but it won't give the sense of what it means to be a vecina in a neighborhood. The reason why I chose them as the group I will be talking about is because of the particular way in which these vecinas inhabit their space, in which way they are part and parcel of a neighborhood. They are not just someone who lives in a house, comes in and out, but they are the ones that are concerned about what is going on, what are the challenges, what are the injustices, what is it that in terms of a community that shares a physical space, and they feel that whatever happens, not just to their particular family, but to the neighborhood at large, it happens to them, and they would be engaged. And this is what I would like to talk about with an example of a particular program that it started precisely from women taking the initiative to say, this cannot go on like this is unjust, this is causing environmental degradation, this is causing problems. So again, I would be talking about vecinas de Montevideo. Thank you.
Kaya, can you unmute yourself, please? Yeah.
There we go. Hi, I'm next. I'm Hayat Fakir. I'm from South Africa. Currently spending some time in The Hague as the Prince Claus Chair on Equity and Development. Yes, I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me. So I'll be talking about the activities, the organization of the Rural Women's Assembly, which is a movement of self-organizing women farmers and women farm workers, which is spread over approximately 13 countries in sub-Saharan Africa. The membership itself counts nearly 80,000, and they definitely see themselves as organizing at a grassroots level, because the organization, the activity is at community level, and also comprise membership to other kinds of organizations like feminist organizations, community-based organizations, and so on. And why I'm talking about their activities today is because they see their agricultural activities not to be separate from the activities they do in relation to dealing with the impact of climate change. It's very much part and parcel of how they provide food, how they work the land, etc., and how they engage with other organizations. So just to end off, they have, one of their slogans is that women don't just hold up half the sky. Women are also the holders of seed, of land, of love, and of labor. And I very much look forward to telling you more about the activities.
Good morning to you all. I'm Miriam Carangiu. Thank you for inviting me. I'm Italian. I'm from Campania. And I'm sorry, but my English is not so good, so I prefer to read the text I wrote some weeks ago, not to make mistakes. I'm a farmer, and I live in Terra dei Fuochi, the land of fires, which is a place of environmental disaster in South Italy. I'm part of different grassroots organizations, such as Rete di Cittadinanza e Comunità, or Stop Biocidio, strictly fighting the land of fires phenomenon. And last year, I founded an ecofeminist group named Georgica that works on food sovereignty and agroecology. I'm also the coordinator of 2 farmer informal nets based on alternative economies and agroecology. Well, my grassroots organizations, women, they've been told by media like mothers, always like mothers. So we're trying to tell them that they are more than mothers. They have political ability to stay in the grassroots movement and to express themselves as this. So thank you very much for inviting me again, and maybe I can speak about my movements later in a minute. Thank you very much.
So, good evening from India here. So it's late evening for us, but it's great to be part of this webinar. And thank you, Pangea, Wendy, everyone, for allowing me on behalf of Mahila Kisan Adhikar Manch, which is MAKAM, which is a women farmers forum and has been consistently fighting and visibilizing the question of women across the country. It's a very active network in more than 20 states of the country. But today, obviously, I will not be able to represent all those voices which are working with forest rights, fisheries, with agricultural labor, migrant workers, and cultivators themselves. So today, I will speak of women who belong to families and districts that come from a very huge manifestation of the agrarian distress. And these are women farmers from farmer suicide households. So this is one of the very serious problems in India, but particularly the state that I come from. So whereas I will talk about this community in terms of their fight and their struggle for laying claims to land and also other entitlements from the state, but also trying to fight patriarchy, caste, parallelly trying to vocalize some of those issues. And importantly, making a plea for a transition from a chemical-based paradigm in agriculture to a more food and nutrition security-focused paradigm where agroecology forms the basis of it. So it's a huge struggle, I think, from asserting their rights over resources to laying an alternate future that they are looking for. So I'm happy to share some of those stories. Thank you.
Oh. Okay, well, my name is Agustina Solera. I come from Argentina. I am actually in the Netherlands. I'm part of the Prince Claus Chair together with Hayat Fakir and Wendy Harcourt. And the grassroots communities I have been engaged with and I have learned from is the Mapuche indigenous community situated in the Andean area of Patagonia, Argentina. Throughout my doctoral research, I participated in different practices of daily life together with Mapuche community, longing to learn from their ways of being in relation based on the Andean worldview. So in this framework, one of the places in which I actively participated was the rural schools located within the ancestral territories of Mapuche community in Neuquén province. So throughout my work, I have been involved with the Mapuche community and the struggles for epistemological and for cultural reconstitution. So today I am interested in sharing the struggles that teachers and mothers carry out together in those rural schools. First, again, the stigma and the shame of being Mapuche, and then towards the vindication of Mapuche knowledge, language, memories, and cultures for the reconstitution of that erased way of being in relation based on care and respect for life in its entire way of understanding it, life for others, human and other than humans.
Hi everyone. Hello. Thank you for having me here. My name is Siti Maimuna. You can call me Mai. I'm from Indonesia. I'm doing PhD at the University of Passau, Germany at the moment, and part of the WEGO research network. 20 years ago, there is a proposed gold mine in my hometown. Not just threaten the source of water, but also the Meru Betiri National Park in Jember, East Java. It made me join the movement against mining in Indonesia. Since then, I have worked with the national network established by NGOs and communities affected by mining, oil and gas during the authoritarian regimes. I did advocacy work at the national level and investigation and campaign with the community. At the moment, I'm board of Jatam. However, women issue was not getting proper attention. So together with some women activists in East Kalimantan, a province where the most coal extracted in Indonesia, we decided to establish a women organization called TKPT, Tim Kerja Perempuan dan Tambang, in 2015 to work with women in the community affected by mining. So my focus advocacy has been in Molo. This is the small island which is vulnerable for the climate impact, and also Kalimantan Island, the most coal extracted in Indonesia. So I work with the Masyarakat Adat, we call here, indigenous people organization called OAT in Molo, to support the alternative to mining, led by an indigenous woman, and in Kalimantan campaigning for water justice with the community and NGOs in East Kalimantan. So when doing a PhD in Germany, I continue my activism as an expression of studying with, from far away, of course. When COVID was started, we set up Ruang Baca Puan, which is an online course on ecofeminism for Indonesian women youth. So we hope it will be connecting women in the women resistant in the rural and urban youth in Indonesia. So happy to share my experience with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. These are like sort of teasers, right, to what you're about to share with us. It's fascinating how it's sort of both place-based, small groups, but also transnational, really engaging on different levels. And also, clearly, everybody is positioning yourselves with people and in different capacities. So also some are farmers, some are researchers, some are just engaged with these issues. So I think this is a wonderful diversity amongst the panel. And I think why we're wanting to do it this way is because in these big events, because after all, we're sort of nestled in thousands of such panels, it's confusing about where to go, what you learn, what are these events really for? And as someone who's had to really be part of many such discussions over the years, I know what I remember are the stories, the stories that speak to your heart, and even if you haven't felt them on your skin, they enter into how you are really trying to transform the world from wherever you are. So I'm listening to all of you, and I'm sure everyone else who is also curious to know what kind of inspiring story can you tell of resistance and struggle that really made a difference for the community that you're working with and for yourself, of course. So what we've asked each of you to do is really to share in just 5 minutes. It's a short story, but I hope an inspirational one, because in these times, I think we need some positive inspiration so that we can really learn how you do transform from unjust situations into a struggle that really is resilient and can make that difference. So this time round, now I see Mai has gone off screen. I hope she's still there. I was going to suggest we reverse the order, but if Mai is not, Mai, are you there? Or are you? Yes, great. It's just to keep people on their toes. So if you could in 5 minutes, Mai, and then Augustina, then Seema, then Miriam, then Kayat and Anna, and then we'll have one more round again, okay? So just reversing the order, just give people a different chance. Is that okay, Mai? So off you go, your story, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Wendy. My story is about women resistant against extractivism, of course. I will start with the story of the Masyarakat Adat, indigenous people of Molo, who are against marble mining. They live in the savannah with the shortest rainy season, so you can imagine the climate change impact to them, and water reserve depending on the protection of the forests and limestone mountains. They teach me simple learning to understand the relation between human and the environments. How is nature like the human body? Rocks as bone, water as blood, soil as like flesh, and forest like a skin and hair. Resistance against the marble mind means refusing the destruction of human body and the body of nature, because the body and nature cannot be separated. The resistance to defend the bodies is embedded in women's everyday experiences and become the resistance strategy, such as occupying a mining site by weaving collectively. The women shift their domestic activities to the mine site, preparing food, cooking, daily rituals, care, weaving, singing, storytelling, teaching weaving to the young children, and others activities. Of course, the company can continue to mine. And of course, it was not a short and single protest. It happened many times, and sometimes they were facing intimidation and violation from the governments and the company. And of course, the company supporter. Even there is a conflict between the community who pro and anti-mining. One of the community members was attacked by the company. However, the marble mining successfully suspended, to marble mining even. So it became a crucial stage for the movement as many companies plan to get mining permits. This struggle inspires them to create a mantra. We will not sell what we cannot make. It means they will not sell the land, forests, or rivers because they don't create them. They will sell agriculture product and weaving. And for maintaining the resistance, every 2 or 3 years, the women group led a festival to celebrate the customary and resistance. They invite other communities, have weaving exhibition, also game competition, and share the storytelling and discussion to revive their mantra. In Indonesia, we call human body is tubuh. And the nature or the territory where the body belongs is tanah air, which is tanah means soil and air implies water. I call this the resistance to defense tubuh tanah air. Defending the bodies or tubuh tanah air is the reason behind the most women-led resistance against extractivism in Indonesia. Another community in the Kendeng Mountains region in Central Java, women led the resistance against mine and cement factories. The women and men have protested by burying their feet with cement in front of the presidential palace for several weeks to express their suffering when limestone mountains are extracted. They wear black clothes, create songs in the local language, and sings in every protest. Like this, Ibu bumi sing maringi, Ibu bumi kang ngalami, Ibu bumi kang ngasihi. Bury the feet in cement become the symbol of resistance and gaining solidarity from young people and academics in Indonesia. For the first time, the academics established public lecture at the front of the President Palace. They were getting similar support from Germany, where Heidelberg Cement, the base of the company, owner the mine and smelter there. The resistance is continued, and you can follow them by visiting our online exhibition at the moment. On behalf of the Extracting Us Collective, I invite you to visit our online exhibition, Despite Extractivism, supported and organized by WEGO and University of Brighton. One of the contributors, Dewi Chandraningrum, is a painter and ecofeminist inspired by the Kendeng woman resistance. We invite you to visit her series or Kartini Kendeng. I will put the link in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mai. That was really beautiful, especially breaking all conventions by singing to us. That was a wonderful voice. Thank you so much. So, Augustina.
Okay. Okay. I'm telling my story from Andean Patagonia in Argentina, which is the place where I grew up As you may have heard, it is a very vast territory located in the south of South America. So it is the south of the south. And the region of Patagonia evokes endless pristine land, a land virgin and rich in natural resources, with full potential for development. Patagonia evokes the idea of a land of resources and pioneers, and a space without a past and full of possibilities for the future. So it evokes the idea of a hostile space inhabited by enemies of the nation, which in the past were called savages and in the present are called terrorists. So I was raised and educated under this idea of Patagonia, the official one. I was unaware of the plurality of stories and knowledge silenced by the official narratives. Only when I met the Mapuche community did I learn about them. And together with them, I learned about the fear, the stigma, and the shame of being Mapuche. So I am telling this story today, as I told you before, from the rural schools of Andean Patagonia. Because after the campaigns of extermination, of attempt of extermination and the appropriation of the southern territories, the schools in Argentina played a main role in civilizing the surviving populations. And civilizing meant training citizens to be valuable, to be useful for the nation, by denying their own knowledge, their own languages, histories, and ways of being in relation to others. And public policies, such as the prohibition of indigenous languages in school and the imposition only of Spanish, it was one language, one flag, the imposition of patriotic symbols gave legitimacy to this subjugation. So it's not coincidence then that in the present, the rural schools located inside of the territories that have been restituted to the communities are spaces in which struggles for resistance and for re-existence germinate. These schools are the places of belonging within the indigenous communities. The schools are the heart of the communities, and they are fertile spaces, intercultural spaces, where different groups encounter. So as states, institutions, schools are also the link between the community and the national state. In rural schools, teachers, often Western teachers that come from the town, from the cities close by, together with indigenous mothers, began to denounce, to raise voice to the historical situations of violence and invisibility inside the community, and together work collaboratively for improvements inside the communities. So in rural schools, I met powerful and long-standing struggles that fundamentally teachers and mothers carry out together to transform this national device of discipline, stigmatization, and embarrassment, especially embarrassment of being indigenous in the past, into an intercultural space of vindication and of identital reaffirmation. The struggles for the reconstitution of language, knowledge, history, and culture silenced is one of those long-standing struggles. And those struggles cannot be understood apart from the struggles of social and environmental justice. These are local, subtle, and maybe silent struggles, but seek precisely to reconstitute a way of being in relation, sustained on care, and especially on the regeneration of this complete way of life.
Oh, thank you again, Augustina. These are beautiful stories of regeneration from, as you say, very much stigma and erasure. So thank you so much for sharing. Seema.
Thanks. Yes, that was beautiful to listen to both Mai and Augustina, and I'm sure there are more stories to follow. I'm going to share a story, which is a collective story of the Women Farmers Forum, Makam, across a few states, but of course I will bring the focus onto the state where I come from, which is Maharashtra, in the western Indian state. And this is a story about women farmers, as I said, who come from farmer suicide affected households, and farmer suicides are actually a manifestation of an agrarian distress, which is it's an extreme event, I would say, and multiple factors contribute to it, in terms of what the state has been able to provide. That's the government, the kind of policies, the kind of lobbies that are, of the chemical industry, the pesticide industry, which is sort of ensuring that the costs of cultivation are raised. There is a whole commercialization of agriculture and a transition that we are seeing from, more decentralized, localized food production systems where knowledge hierarchies were not really central, whereas now with the whole corporatization, we see a very clear shift. And that is where, the kind of farmer suicides that we are seeing in the states, and particularly these are states that are rapidly urbanizing, industrializing, and where agriculture increasingly gets seen in the commercial space. So these are, stories of the farmer suicides, but the women from these households, in fact, have never been visible. So much of the program, if at all there was any, was limited to providing relief to the household, but never really trying to address the issues of revival or supporting the women to come out of this crisis and see them as farmers, as recognize them as workers and farmers in their own right. So Makam's story actually starts from there, where politicizing this issue, centralizing the question of women farmers as farmers and not just as widows of these farmers. I think that has been the story, and it has been an extremely vibrant struggle, I would say, from recognizing the issue, the stigma that is associated with it, the dispossession of their rights. A majority of them never had access to the land that actually belonged to the family. So they've been rendered as either wage labor or as, impoverished workers with very little by way of wages or work. So how did we, mobilize these women? I mean, that's the story I would like to tell, obviously. Otherwise, it's a sad story where, we simply do not see these women as workers. But I think with Makam and the kind of center staging of the question of recognition and voice to women farmers, a large number of these invisible workers had to be brought to the forefront. And this was an issue that was cutting across several states of the country. And the first thing that was raised was they need to be recognized as farmers and their voices need to be heard. So in Maharashtra, of course, there was a very strong, mobilization. Consultations were were held across the region, particularly in districts where suicides were high in number, and women were brought there, and their voices, which ranged from issues not just related to stigma and not being recognized as farmers, but also questions of sexual harassment at workplace and defining or redefining the agrarian workspace. I think some of these issues were very vibrantly discussed, and that sort of led to a culmination of a manifesto that was prepared as to what is it that we want from both the state and the society. I think collectivization process has been very critical, and now across states, I'm happy to see so many Makam friends here, but Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Uttarakhand, so many other states have also been voicing these concerns. One of the major sort of movements that we had in the state capital, and that got a lot of attention of the policymakers and those in the government. And one of our achievements, I would say, is that there was attention given to this category as a political category that demanded attention and that demanded a formulation of a different kind of a policy. And I think that's a huge achievement, not just for Makam, but every woman who came for that rally, who came for that consultation that was held, that she has been able to center stage and forefront her issues. So I think what the movement gave us was certainly certain rights in terms of prioritization in different agricultural schemes and programs, which unfortunately are only centered around ownership to land. And unfortunately, that excludes them already. So some of these policy agenda has been center staged, but I would like to move on also from there. So while we struggle to ensure that the state provides for what it promised in terms of whether it was land rights or in terms of priorities for women as farmers in various agricultural programs, what the women after the pandemic are going ahead and saying is that we no longer want to be trapped in the same agricultural paradigm that in the first place led to these farmer suicides. So women are saying during the pandemic, they have seen how commercialization of agriculture, in fact, left them without food. And women are saying that we want to grow food. We want to move towards a more caring, agricultural way forward. And now we have, in just one state, we have close to 180 to 200 women who belong to these farmer suicide households who have signed up to a transition where they're saying no to chemicals, no to chemical fertilizers, no to chemical pesticides. We don't want to be controlled by the corporates. We want our knowledge and our understanding of our farms to be at the forefront. And I think that's a huge statement. So from entitlements to what we see as the way forward, I think that's a paradigm that is emerging. And at Makam, we are still developing our perspectives, our vision around what is that, whether we call it ecofeminism or feminist political ecology, but there's a politics to it. It's not just about, caring and sharing, but there is a new way that we are talking about. So very happy to share more in the subsequent rounds. But I think, it has been indeed very, very inspiring to be part of this process. I'll stop here. Thanks.
Thank you, Seema. That was indeed a very inspiring story, and apologies that we've got such short time at this moment to hear, and great to know that other members of Makam are here and are putting in also resources so we can follow that up. But wonderful to hear resistance really moving towards also systemic resistance as well. So I now would invite Miriam to share the story from Italy.
Even if I don't speak English so well, I can understand what you're saying. So I'll keep your words or your songs in my heart. Thank you very much. The stories and our movements are so many, but we have some difficulties in telling them because they are often stories of hurt, of mothers who lost their children, and people who lost their lives. So this time I chose to tell another story. There's a story of my life, because I have a particular story to tell. When I was 40 4 years old, I was fired. And I worked in a shipping company that suddenly closed. So I decided to make my life something more. I needed to be happy. So I took the opportunity given from my husband's family. They had a plot of land reserved to agriculture. And I started studying agroecology, completely changing not only my job, but my entire system of thinking. Working the land with my own hands and feeling a deep contact with all that is alive, I recognized the land of fires as my true country. And I swore to myself that I would have been doing everything I could to make my land bloom again. The land of fires is a place in which 2 million people live and is characterized by toxic fires or by illegally discharged waste, big polluting mega infrastructures such as incinerators and gas power plants, and a phenomenon called eco-mafia that is organized crime connected to corrupted politicians and irresponsible managers. It's right here that agroecology is more necessary and better, agroecology made by women, because it's the regeneration of the relationship between nature and human beings, not only the organic techniques to cultivate the land. That's the reason why I became a member of some of the main grassroots movements in Terra dei Fuochi, and later of a group of women, all of them cultivating gardens, trying to fight for food sovereignty and agroecology. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miriam, for a really powerful statement, really coming from the heart and then also embodied, very embodied. And I'm sure we'd all love to know more. Thank you so much for sharing. And no apologies at all for your English. It's us apologizing that we can't engage in everybody's own languages. So thank you again. And Kaya, please, if you could continue the storytelling.
Great, thanks, Wendy. The Rural Women's Assembly that the movement that I'm talking about has aspirations to spread the membership across Africa. Africa is, as you may know, a very big continent, but also has very real connections with other parts of the world. But I want to focus in my storytelling, I want to focus on an example from South Africa. So South Africa itself, a very big country, and because of its width and its breadth, it feels the impact of climate change in different ways, from extremes of floods, droughts, and any other situation in between, which makes, of course, farming very difficult, which makes the provision of healthy food and nutrition to communities, to children, etc., extremely difficult. And this is one of the ways in which the Rural Women's Assembly tries to engage communities beyond just farm working communities or farmer communities, and that is through campaigns around food sovereignty and hunger, especially amongst children. So I wanted to use an example from a small little town, which is about an hour and a half's drive from Cape Town. It's situated in a beautiful valley, which is quite green, with mountain passes and so on. And this area is also very popular for cyclists from all over the world who come there for 2 days a year and then ride 200 kilometers over 2 days. So very beautiful, but the community where this example comes from, it's called Suurbraak. And what the name implies is that it is situated in a very arid, non-arable land. In other words, the land itself isn't very amenable to agricultural production. And here is one of a small group of women who are connected to who are members of the Rural Women's Assembly, have been engaging with their local municipality, local government, as well as national government bodies in order to get access to land for the production of food. And those struggles and protests have been quite unsuccessful. They also tried to organize access to local common pieces of land where they could graze the animals or produce food. And with also very little impact. So, but out of the involvement in these struggles and also in connection with discussions and meeting and organizing with other membership groups in the Rural Women's Assembly, they have then collaborated with fisherwomen and started an aquaponics production of vegetables. And with this, they were able to use quite productively a very small piece of land where the vegetables are planted in water and can be farmed on based on a terrace-like structure, but the water is populated by fish, which feed from the nutrients and the oxygen that the plants emit into the water, and at the same time, the fish then fertilize the water. And this example for me was not just about a pragmatism, right? About the pragmatic use of a small piece of or limited access to land. It is also an illustration of how the idea of or the notion of agri-ecology isn't separate from food production and from care for their communities and for their children. So, but it also demonstrates for me a way in which organizations, women working on the land, women fundamentally working in nature, can build collaborations across different geographies, in a sense, if one looks at land versus sea workers, and in order to not just improve their own conditions and the conditions of the community, but to collectivize, struggle for access to production through land and sea. Thank you.
Thank you, Kayat, for really bringing together the idea of how women's groups work with the earth in ways that can really transform landscapes, but also people's livelihoods from a huge continent like Africa. I'm going to ask Anna now for the last story in this round. So thank you.
Thank you for all the stories. And as I said, I'm going to share one particular case of complaint that the vecinas, as I said, from Montevideo, which, by the way, in the 5 years that I was Defensora, women presented more than 60% of all the situations, which already shows the engagement that women have in relation to what happens in their neighborhoods. So one particular complaint has to do with abandoned houses. Abandoned houses, in particular in the old city, that is the historical neighborhood of the city of Montevideo. And the issue with abandoned houses, of course, it has a lot to do with the degradation. Why are abandoned houses a problem? They have to do with urban degradation. They have to do with public insalubrity. They have to do with generating conditions of insecurity in the neighborhoods, impacting in the mobility, the use of public space, the communal life. They also impact on the opportunities that many people who are homeless can have a dignified house, because you have a stock of houses that are empty, that are owned by some people, but they abandon them and then they start to deteriorate. Some people occupy them and live in conditions without water, without electricity, without sanitation. So that is also in a deteriorating condition, not just for that particular house, but for the surrounding houses and for the city at large. It's a denial of the right to the city, because this is a neighborhood with all the established services, and people have to look outside, although there is space that is in the inner city and has been abandoned. So one can say that this is a real environmental problem that was facing the city of Montevideo, and that comes to the attention of the Defensoría, because these women come and complain as part of the neighborhood. As a result of that, the Defensoría implemented a research to identify, well, what is happening with abandoned houses in the city of Montevideo, and in particular in the central areas. It was clear how many houses were abandoned, etc. I'm going to make it short. But what happened was that this led to the creation of a program within the municipality of the city of Montevideo that is called Fincas Abandonadas, el programa de Fincas Abandonadas, which means a program for abandoned houses. And the purpose of this program was to recover abandoned, deteriorated houses that had debts located in central areas of the city, with the aim of restoring their social functions. And what was going to be the use of these abandoned houses once recovered was something to debate precisely with the neighbors and with various social groups active in the old city of Montevideo. As a result of this process, 3 uses were identified for these houses. The first one is a very innovative concept of dispersed cooperatives. Uruguay has a long tradition of building housing cooperatives that, of course, they tend to be in the same plot. But the idea was to take some of these abandoned houses and build houses with a logic of a cooperative that is owned collectively, although they would be dispersed within the neighborhood, taking some of these houses. The other use that was agreed upon was to have what is called in Spanish a trans house. That is, in response to the LGBTI community that was demanding to have a community space to care for people in the process of gender change in their families. And this space already exists, and it's under construction, and it will be managed by the same groups of the LGBT community that presented the demand and are part of the project. The third use of the houses is what I think in English is called a halfway home. This home aids at providing secure space for people facing different situations, such as domestic violence, homelessness, having come out of different types of institutionalizations, including having been in prison for a long time and not having a network to fall back once they come out. And in this halfway home that is already built and is already in usage, each person or family has an independent unit, but they share spaces and services, and they engage in collective search for long-term solutions for housing in other situations that they face. So from the perspective of the work that we did, we believe that even from a feminist ecological, feminist political ecological perspective, the idea that women from a localized space where they come to complain for something that is affecting not necessarily themselves, but from their bodily experience of being part of the neighborhood, of being concerned with problems that are arising in that neighborhood, they develop a sense of what should be happening in that localized space that by definition will affect others in the neighborhood and eventually in the city at large. That is to say, in this coming together of the women, of the municipality, of the Defensoría and other social groups, there is a placing of demands in the framework of an urban agenda based on sustainability, fair and equitable perspective that eventually, in the case that I share this particular program, lead to specific solutions that transform abandoned houses that were generating problems and were almost a symbol of the denial of the rights of housing, of a clean space. This process, the women that were was initiated by the women, led to social policies implemented by the municipality that provided a response to a series of dimensions that have to do with housing, with the rights of groups that are discriminated against, and of contributing to a much more clean and equitable space in the neighborhood. So that is my story.
Thank you, Anna. And as you said, and as everyone said, there can be many stories. And your story really tells us how it gets transformed into policy and into action via feminists being in the right place, such as yourself being ombudsperson in Uruguay. Thank you for sharing that very much. And also for making the environment more than just the rural. You really brought it into being the urban and all of us having to relate to the environment and to creating safe spaces, as one person put in the chat. Really fascinating. So you've all told really powerful and moving stories. We have another 20 minutes together. And what I had suggested we could look at now was what did you learn from each other? Or what do you want the CSW, I mean, as we're here supposedly in this virtual space where maybe they're listening, what would you like to bring to that forum, or indeed, what would you bring back to the people, to the places where you're engaged and so active and doing so many important things? So these were the three kinds of ideas that I thought we could have maybe a looser discussion now, as a panel should. Very difficult to do online, of course. But I did want to, if that's okay with you, Miriam, start with you, because I know you already shared actually quite briefly what you were doing, and it would be nice to hear from you more. And I've seen in the chat people are talking about connections and how to continue. So do keep using the chat, and we'll also try to, if you'd like to ask a question of the audience or any of you, just signal. Otherwise, I'll be conducting a little bit the discussion. Miriam, though, would that be okay if you started? Thank you.
Yeah, that's okay. Women always need to be together all over the world and mostly need to share experiences and practices. Many of ours have less and less time to work on their political positioning in the grassroots movements like mine because of the consequences of COVID pandemic that spread us out and addressed us towards a very hard care work. As farmer and activist, I always dedicated a lot of time to care of my land, care of my community, and obviously care of my loves and family. Now that's all duplicated, and at the same time, there's no interest in non-feminist groups for women and their particular duties, times, or emotional need to talk about what they feel, especially for women of my age. All that matters is often how much powerful we seem to the world. And even if I can deeply understand the eternal state of emergency we live, the death we daily have to face, and the ecological disaster we have to fight, we should force ourselves to do better. Women can change things. Listening to their stories will help us, males and females, to do better and to transform our existences and enhance our struggles without repeating the capitalism dynamics. Thank you very much.
I see some nods there. This is the systemic change that we're all looking towards, whether CSW is listening for that, but I think we're certainly hearing you, Miriam. I wondered if somebody from the panel would like to respond to that. I imagine Seema, because you've already raised that as something that you're doing, or Kayat, also I know your work is on that. So would either of you like to respond? I see you're also busy in the chat, excuse me, but can I invite a response to that, or to some additional comments from the panel?
Kayat, do you want to go ahead? Okay.
I think it's your floor, Seema.
Oh, all right. So I think this was really such a great learning for many of us. I think just the exchange of so many ideas and the need to build solidarities across, I think, countries and regions has come out very, very strongly. And what Miriam, of course, said also in terms of, what is it that we are sort of envisaging as that, future or the change that we're looking for. I think, there are just a couple of things that I would like to say here in terms of what the CSW needs to listen to. I think all of these stories are powerful stories, and they're telling that women are organizing, women are collectivizing. On the one hand, yes, for improved access to resources, but I think in every story we heard that they are looking at alternative ways of living and creating this world, whether it's the story of urban abandoned houses, or I think what we heard from Kayat, Mai, everyone. I think that's what we want the CSW to listen to. That there is a voice, there is a strong perspective and a vision that is emerging from collectivizing that is happening around a more caring and sharing world. And we clearly see, women across the diverse social groups as protagonists of this kind of a movement. I think without essentializing women, what we're seeing here is the knowledge, the understanding that they have around resources and livelihoods. I think that's the message, central message that I think we would like the CSW to listen to. But for us, I think the clear message is that we really need to build transnational solidarities. I'm part of WEGO, and that's been an excellent experience of just sharing and learning from so many of you. So I think that would be really great, and a message that I think, or a learning that I hope to carry from here.
Thank you, Seema. Kaya, could I invite you to continue?
Yes, thank you, Wendy. And of course, I absolutely agree with what Seema has also been saying. I mean, what the message that came up for me through listening to the different stories and also the comments on that is this notion of making these connections within movements, but also across movements, and then transnationally. I think that comes across very, very strongly. But also, as Wendy has pointed out and Anna has pointed out, making connections between the rural and the urban. Because I don't think in any of these regions that we're talking about, in any of the countries that we're talking about, that we're learning from, that we can make a clear disconnect between rural and urban. They are in a relationship with each other and influences people's daily lives quite fundamentally. But I wanted also to, Seema, I want to point you to your own words earlier, right? You spoke about, this caring and sharing world that we all actively creating every day through these connections and so on. And very importantly, you said earlier, it's not just about caring and sharing. It is about a politics. There is a politics, a very strong politics, a very difficult politics there, which I think is an alternative and which could be at the root of something different and something much less exploitative and oppressive. And in terms of then where does this lead policy-wise? What does it mean for the CSW? What does it mean for the multilaterals? My question to them would be, what are the usefulness of certain terms which are being used, certain terms with fundamental implications for where they land, certain terms which are seen to be quite instrumental and important for growth and development, terms such as green economy, blue economy, etc., all different kinds of economies. What we are saying is that there is another world there where people are actively building connections. People are actively caring for their nearest and dearest, for the environment, for non-humans, and so on, which is different from the obvious economy. Right? But is always in the shadow of that economy, always being determined by that economy. And where is the value of multilateral organizations in providing a way for these alternatives to really take root and get traction on a transnational global scale?
That's a fascinating comment. I'll ask Anna afterwards to respond, not right now, because I'd love Mai to do it, because I think you're coming from a very different perspective, and I'd love to hear her response first. Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Wendy. Thank you, everyone. It's really inspiring conversation. Especially first, what I learned is actually women around the world, wherever they are, it's still facing the multiple injustice. It's not just about sector, but also urban, rural, and kind of that. There's the first. The second is what you talk about. In the context of knowledge, restitution, food, agriculture, policy network, for me is kind of alternative to development at the moment, alternative to what you call like economic growth, and Kayat, you mentioned about the false solution in the context of green economy, even like blue economy in my country also is like people starting to coloring what economy is actually. But I think what important that I learned is every alternative that all speakers mentioned is about how to building connection, but reconnects to others and to nature. I think the knowledge restitution is really important. How to things is starting to I think most of us like start to how the resistance, how the struggle is like defend our bodies, and what you all share is about a struggle. If I have the second bodies, it's my second body. So we relate it and imagining that network. We not just defend our lands, but thinking about all of you as really real networks, not just like online network. I don't know how to express that, but it's really giving hope and meanings what we need to do in every aspect actually. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mai. I really appreciate giving hope and meanings in whatever form, whether it's virtual like now, but in your singing and in all these stories. I think there is something, as Soma now just added, very beautiful, which does give us hope in very difficult times. We've got just a few minutes, and I wanted Anna to come in because she really knows this sort of game of the CSW and has done a lot of work at different policy levels. So I'd love to hear her point of view. And then at the same time, I just wanted to flag in the chat, there's some interesting resources. Do take a look at it. We've recorded this, so we will take the essence of what's being said and share it on the Pangea and WEGO websites. And I hope also continue these conversations because they don't just finish here. As far as how we get it to the CSW, that's for some of the advocates amongst us, but that's also part of what you've invited us to do. So Anna, would you like to sort of complete the sort of panel discussions? Augustina, thank you for giving the space and for your contributions. I appreciate also that you're allowing this last intervention from Anna, and then I'll be asking Simona to close the panel. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Wendy, and to all of you. I actually want to make reference to various words that I was taking notes as each of you were talking, because I think they reflect a lot of what maybe CSW should take. The word resistance came a lot, but it's not a resistance that is just the denial of what is being imposed, but a creative resistance of saying there are other ways and they're not there just to be thought about. They are happening. They are happening on the ground. They are happening on a daily basis. And I think this came out very, very strongly. And there are, reconstitute a way of being in relation to others and to nature, move towards more caring agriculture. Agroecology is not just different form of agriculture, but of seeing life. What Kayat was telling, it's one could say this planting and water is innovative technologies that are based on local knowledge. So there has been historically a systematical denial of other possibilities outside mainstream capitalist production. And what I think that comes out here is how on a daily basis, other forms of relating among ourselves, of relating to nature, of securing food, of securing life. And that is why another word that came was celebrations. It came in more than one occasion, because there are reasons for celebration, the knowledge, the possibilities of interaction, the possibilities of transformation, that it's not that they're not there, but they are being ignored. And I think that what we are claiming as women's organizations, as academia, as people also thinking of social policies, is that these policies need to be informed by what mainly women are doing on the ground. And it's not we have to do so much research to bring it to the fore. These stories per se are examples of the possibilities of doing things in a way that are, by definition, caring for the soil, for nature, for our relationships, for those that are not yet there, for those that were there and left so many knowledge to all of us. And that knowledge cannot be ignored because it has secured the possibility of precisely food sovereignty and so on. So I think that instead of this coloring the economy or coloring development with a lot of words that resilient and what have you, for once, the expectation is really give visibility to what is happening on the ground and what women are putting as not just for themselves, but as examples of what other ways of inhabiting this world that by necessity has to be a caring way of inhabiting the world can happen. So really, I mean, just by bringing in those words that were shared by all of you, I think we have a real interesting agenda for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. That was so beautifully said and very inspiring and very positive, and exactly what this WEGO well-being Ecology Gender Community Network is about. And I hope many of you obviously are in these kinds of networks, which give us ways of going forward with these stories. Very, very inspiring. Thank you. So thanks, everybody. I'm now going to give the floor to Simona from Pangea to close the session.
Yeah, thank you very much, Wendy, and thanks to all the speakers, because you give to all of us some trust in future, and the fact that we are at the same time in the same world, but in a different practices or of caring practices at the same time, make really, another perspective, another gender perspective, or which kind of future we want. So thanks again, and we hope to be in touch also out of CSW, because this is just one opportunity of space that we have taken. But of course, as in the fact that we are women and we are part of a movement, of course, we will take more space to raise our voice. Thank you very much.